In 2006, I decided to rent a game for the next few days but had no idea what was available that I hadn't already played, as my primary gaming console was still the PlayStation 2. Walking through the aisle, one game cover caught my eye that I hadn't seen before: Yakuza. I didn't bother reading the back cover and just gave it a shot. To my surprise, Yakuza felt like a 3D side-scroller beat-em-up, featuring a fantastic story and a pretty enjoyable dub. I poured a great amount of hours into Yakuza before seeing the epic ending. 2 years later saw the Western release of its sequel and forced me to pull out my semi-retired PlayStation 2 to play through another fantastic entry in this underrated franchise. While the argument can be made there were quality dips during the PlayStation 3 era offerings, consisting of 3 mainline games and a spin-off, my hopes were incredibly high for the next Yakuza game, Yakuza 0. My expectations paid off in grand fashion, and I found myself even more excited over the remake of my original Yakuza experience, utilizing Zero's engine, Yakuza Kiwami. Having essentially played this game over a decade ago, I definitely knew what I was in for in regards to the qualifications to succeed in total completion. Thankfully, instead of just being a visual remaster, Kiwami gives the player more than anyone could have envisioned the game could handle on the PS2, thanks to the ideas from its sequels and predecessors, including minigames, co-op modes, and even additions to the story through thoughtfully crafted extra cutscenes and sub-stories. After nearly 50 hours, I witnessed the credits roll and the information that I had completed nearly 70% of the game, including all the sub-stories, and a special design edition exclusive to Kiwami, Majima Everywhere. Like Zero, my playtime with Kiwami is slowly coming to an end, as playing climax battles and buying stuff for a little orphan girl just doesn't have the same flair without a real story to keep things interesting. Having been a fan of the franchise for over a decade, my expectations of what was to come from this latest iteration were not only high, but to a certain extent reasonable, thanks to the greatness of the original game Kiwami is crafted after, and the engine that powered its most recent predecessor. And one of the main reasons for Kiwami's success as another mostly fantastic offering from Sega is its story. Not only does Kiwami perfectly retell the story of Yakuza, it also adds sequences via cutscenes to expand on the plot that couldn't be done until the lore started playing out more and more with each game that followed. Kiwami picks up nearly 10 and eventually 20 years after the happenings of Zero, with the focus solely being on the franchise's overpowered poster boy and lead protagonist throughout every game, Kazuma Kiryu. The 15-hour main story starts off with a bang, yet settles into an intriguing narrative of love, corruption through power, abandonment, and revenge, mostly thanks to the introduction of a little girl searching for her mother, Haruka. The gameplay is both mostly unchanged and incredibly different from what was seen in the original game. Kiryu can mix light and strong strikes with the touching of the square and triangle buttons in a timed sequence, grab and potentially toss opponents courtesy of the circle button, and evade with the cross or X button. Kazuma can block attacks and even counter with well-timed attack button presses. With each successful attack dished out by the main character, the heat meter located under Kiryu's health bar will rise so the player can unleash a brutal heat action that can range from a series of body punches to pro wrestling style attacks, including a suplex across a steel traffic rail. Beyond the fundamentals are the drastic changes to fight styles implemented from Zero. For those who played the previous games, the innate sense in regards to how Kiryu plays is completely wrecked when one is introduced to the fact that Kazuma has 4 different fighting styles that forces the player to switch things up from battle to battle with the touch of the D-pad. Kiryu's styles include one based around Counter-Strike's, the Brawler style, a fast-paced, low-powered kickboxing style, Rush, the heavy-hitting, weapon-based yet slow-style Beast, and the style that is essentially the same one from the previous Yakuza games, Dragon of Dojima. In the previous Yakuza games until Zero, the player would quickly become accustomed to each character having one way of fighting and adapt to that style. In Kiwami, the player must adapt to the fight and plan what abilities will help Kiryu in the long run. Unlike Zero, money isn't the basis of style evolution, as experience points return, being awarded following every successful fight or sub-story. Yet Kiryu doesn't feel as underpowered as a fighter in Kiwami from the start like he did in Zero. But that doesn't mean his abilities aren't useful overall. The game's biggest addition to set it apart from any other game in the franchise is definitely Majima Everywhere. Kazuma's fellow protagonist in Zero, Goro Majima, moves back into his antagonist role that made him one of the franchise's most pivotal characters. But rather than simply being relegated to a couple of battles and stupendous cutscenes like in the original version, Goro spends a majority of the game hounding Kiryu by chasing him and forcing him into mostly random battles. Each successful fight sees a ranking meter fill up that usually leads to a memorable battle featuring Majima donning random personas, including a zombie or a breakdancer when the meter is full. The Majima fights are essentially this game's version of the Mr. Shakedown confrontations from Yakuza 0, just without the loss of grand amounts of money if Kiryu suffers a defeat. The rewards for besting Majima are all connected to the Dragon of Dojima fighting style, as completing Majima Everywhere, as well as a series of training sub-stories, can grant Kiryu some of the strongest maneuvers in the game. While Majima Everywhere is beneficial to the gameplay, it does get a little too long-winded and annoying around the time you reach S rank, which is 2 ranks below completion. As per the norm, Kiwami is chock full of stuff to do outside of the main story, including nearly 80 sub-stories that can feature everything from Kiryu fighting a shotgun-wielding man in drag, to chatting it up with cabaret girls, to playing pocket racing featuring the same level of customization as Zero's version, without the randomly generated parts collecting. Even some of the more poorly implemented mini-games from Zero, like betting on girls wrestling in bikinis, is redone to provide a quicker, more satisfying experience, featuring a card collecting mini-game within the mini-game. Plus, with every mini-game playing a part in the 100% completion checklist, the game demands completionists to try out everything and at times be really good in the process. While Kiwami does have some problems, the lacking graphics thanks to the Zero engine, and a head-scratching addition to the battle system where bosses can recharge their health until they're either satisfied or Kiryu uses a heat action to stop them. The overall experience is something to behold, considering it's simply a remake using the same engine of a game that hit Western shores less than a year ago. Like its successors and predecessors alike, Kiwami proves to be a genre-bending experience, part beat-em-up, part RPG, part party game. While somewhat overwhelming thanks to the various amounts of things the player can do without progressing the story, still feels tight and not bloated to the point of exhaustion, even more so than Zero. Fully immersing oneself in the world of Kiwami can bring forth a wealth of different experiences, both negative and positive, but the overall feeling is nothing short of satisfaction, thanks to a memorable narrative, more mini-games and sub-stories found here than in the original version, and a battle system taking advantage of what Zero did right when trying to innovate while keeping the foundation solid. Being half the price of a typical video game release just makes Kiwami that much sweeter of a deal. If you enjoyed the original PS2 version or even Yakuza 0, Kiwami will prove to be incredibly satisfying as well. Kiwami definitely gives the player a taste of the enormity that would become the franchise's norm without sacrificing the overall experience due to hardware limitations like Yakuza did in 2005.
どうやキルちゃん